What's up guys, it's me Jeremy, and today I want to talk about overextending in Hearthstone. Now overextending is a somewhat difficult concept to grasp, but anyone with a good understanding of it can easily outplay novice opponents. And I think the strategy discussed in this video might be the biggest tip I can give to an intermediate player. Let's get started. So what overextending is playing all of your cards at the same time. Knowing when and why to overextend is key to winning. If you overextend too early, your opponent can easily wipe your field, but if you overextend too late, you can get rushed down. Be sure to stay for the end of the game, as I believe this one showed very well when to overextend at a master level gameplay. Pay close attention to how I use my Flame Strike, and enjoy the sneak preview at the next deck of the week. Now in general, what the optimal situation is to wait for your opponent to overextend first, and then if you can deal with that, and overextend to counter it, you will now have a setup field and your opponent will be left with nothing. This is often how pros play competitive card games, such as Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! By waiting for your opponent to overextend, you wait and conserve your cards to where you will be able to deal with your opponent's field once they overextend. After that, you overextend to counter it, and your opponent will have no cards left while you have a full field. This is such a solid tactic that you want to try to set up this situation in almost every single game you play, and you should almost always never be the first player to overextend. Now, that doesn't mean don't play any cards, far from it, as summoning sickness is of course a huge factor in the game, but in Hearthstone, overextending would be pretty much playing 3 to 4 or more cards on the board, and that usually is not a very good idea, unless some of them are floaters. This kind of play leaves you vulnerable to area of effect abilities, or simply just removal cards, as when you play a lot of cards, your hand advantage becomes very weak, and you will have a tough time recovering if you do not gain anything from your board. Many cards gain their advantage through creature removal, so playing all of your creatures too quickly may leave you with no cards left at all, so you pretty much always need to conserve your resources whenever possible, and focus on gaining and maintaining advantage. This conservation of cards will often bait your opponent into thinking that you don't really have that much power in your hand, and then they will overextend, thinking that you can't deal with it, but of course you were just saving your stuff for that very moment, and that's why this is such an effective strategy. When your opponent is very low on cards in their hand, then it's a very good idea to overextend, since you won't have to worry about card advantage if you can deal with your opponent's field, since they'll have nothing left if you can wipe their board. Overextension also works differently against different classes. For example, it may be almost impossible against a mage due to Flame Strike's massive damage, but it can be very doable early versus a paladin or a priest, whose area of effect spells only do 2 damage. Now of course you would be vulnerable to spell damage, but playing around these AoE cards is key when overextending, or you could be left with a huge minus, and a situation that is almost impossible and extremely difficult to come back from, unless you have a solid reason to predict that your opponent does not have these cards. This really just comes with knowledge of other classes, but always try to play around these spells when overextending. Otherwise your opponent might wipe your board and then proceed to overextend on you. Now, there is one other situation where you might want to overextend, and this is where you're trying to rush down your opponent. When you overextend to rush your opponent down, you play all of your cards and hope that he can't deal with your creatures immediately, and you can pick up a quick win. Rushing can be fairly risky in Hearthstone, so it does require a very solid knowledge of all the decks, so I wouldn't recommend it if you're a new player, as quite often you'll end up just short of killing your opponent, so you want to try to rush them only if you can kill them on that turn, or you know that they won't be able to deal with your field on the next turn directly by using area of effect abilities, or you get them low enough to where a win is guaranteed. Overall, just make sure that when you overextend, your opponent has already overextended, or at the very least, try to maintain your hand advantage when you overextend, meaning having more cards in your hand than your opponent. The only situation where you would want to overextend first is where you're trying to rush down your opponent, as it does leave you extremely vulnerable. My name is Jeremy, and that is it for my video on overextending in Hearthstone. I'd love if you could support me with a like, and please subscribe for more awesome content in the future if you enjoyed this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Job's done.
Reporting for duty.
None shall pass.
Reporting for duty.
Let me think.
My eyes are open. Reporting for duty.
It's time for a little blood.
Someday I'll be just like you!
My shield for Argus!
Job's done.
Reporting for duty.
me kill you? To the priest!
Job done.
Bring me steel!
Justice.
Who you want me kill? To the priest!
Reporting for duty.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
The victory
Well played.